Matt Kean, the Treasurer of New South Wales, will have to have a bad performance on Saturday night. Now, this bloke thought he could become the deputy leader, and then enough people in his party didn't want him to become the deputy leader, so he settled for being the Treasurer, the money man of New South Wales. He has got the numbers wrong multiple times since becoming the Treasurer, but shh, don't talk about it. He, of course, is the one who wanted the ghost to get a job in the New South Wales government. I'll get to the ghost in a moment or two's time. And he is the bloke who thinks that the future of the Liberal Party is to be more like the Greens, and you just have to vote for them anyway. And it is quite unusual in a state election for the Treasurer to be getting the puff pieces. But in the lovey parts of the media that have been more than happy with Matt Kean, they do the profile pieces on him. Oh, there's all the photos of him with the blended family. It's so beautiful. There's him in the backyard looking to the future. There's him delivering a budget, being not really cheered but awkwardly looked at by staffers and people in Parliament. But we learned today via the reporting of Andrew Clennell, our political editor, that Matt Kean may well be facing 16% being taken out of his primary vote at the vote coming on Saturday. This may well be the structural problem for the Liberal Party defending government or trying to get opposition, but the reality is that when you lose votes on the Conservative side to One Nation, Liberal Democrats and lots of others, and you lose votes on the lefty side to the Teals, you can't find a path to the 40% primary vote that you need to win enough seats to win a majority. According to the polling, which was done by an industry group, and I believe Andrew Clennell when he says it's credible polling that he's seen here, the Liberal Party is down at 37% primary. That's down 15%. You can see where it's gone. It's gone to the Conservative base of the Liberal Party. One Nation, that wasn't even running a candidate until a couple of weeks ago now, is staring down the barrel of 15% in that seat. The Liberal Democrats may well end up with 6, Labor at 21 and the Greens at 6. Now, before you get too excited, if you're not a fan of Matt Kean, and God knows I'm the biggest fan in New South Wales of Matt Kean, under the first past the post first preference system, he could still win the seat by just having a bigger vote share than anyone else if everyone walks in and vote one. Now, amazingly, for the past couple of days, we've been asking the New South Wales Electoral Commission to tell us how many people at the last election just voted one and walked away. We still haven't got an answer. So let's assume that the vast majority of people do that. And even if there is the big slump that seems to be headed Matt Kean's way and other Liberal seats, they could still end up winning those seats. What matters most about those changes is what's going to happen in the upper house. You see, whoever ends up forming government in minority or majority, they still have to get things through the upper house. And I want One Nation to end up in a dominant position in the crossbench because the current crossbench has got Greens, has got Animal Justice Party, and the expectation is that the legalised cannabis people will end up with a strong enough vote that they too could end up on the crossbench. If Mark Latham repeats what he did at the last election, there will be 4 One Nation MPs in the upper house. If he does better, which the expectation on all the polling is, they could end up with 5. That's a big chunk of people in the upper house. That's why we talk about this polling. But I do want to just throw in just a little pinch of salt here. Because when you actually look at the single biggest council that is inside the seat of Hornsby, at the last mayoral election, where Liberal legend Philip Ruddock was returned as the Lord Mayor, there was still over 40% of the vote that ended up going to the Greens. So there is a solid, hardcore, growing left vote that is happening in that part of Sydney. So we'll wait and see. But if the Greens vote and the Teal vote and the One Nation vote, and I think the Lib Dem numbers are a little overstated, but still, if that all starts to happen, well then the big vote starts to collapse. What comes through the middle is what matters. Now, as always, you don't want bad metaphors in the final days of an election campaign. And every piece of evidence suggests that Labor is going to become the government, but as I have been telling you, there is data to suggest that the late-breaking decisions are going the government's way. And a bad metaphor for the bloke who thinks that he will well and truly be Premier by this time next week in New South Wales was his campaign bus breaking down. It was, of course, an electric bus made in Western Sydney. Isn't it better than everything else? But when it breaks down, there are pictures that appear on the TV news. Guess what the pictures that appeared on the 6 p.m. news tonight in Sydney, where an extreme number of people get their vision from? There. I'll take a punt on one, maybe the front page of tomorrow's newspapers as well. Well, obviously not the Sydney Morning Herald, but they're probably still whinging about poker machines. As for why this happened, Chris Minns did his best to just make it a joke and move on.
I forgot to charge it last night, and as a result, it broke down. Look, bus or no bus, we are ready for the next 4 days. We will be ready for tomorrow, no doubt about it.
But perhaps the most interesting story that happened today happened on our air. It's why you need to be watching Primetime, that starts from 5 o'clock with Shari all the way through to the front page. And of course, Piers Morgan after that. Because the story that came out today was that there was a health drama inside the Premier's house. Apparently, he didn't call an ambulance, but an ambulance turned up. Apparently, the person that he called, according to the details that Shari had and the Premier confessed himself on the air, was the Health Minister. Now, while the Premier will say, of course I didn't ask for it, what do you do when your boss rings with a problem? You try to solve it. It looks like the Health Minister and the head of Ambulance New South Wales did just that. Roll the tape.
So your wife required an ambulance and she called 000, but it took so long to come that you had to ring the Health Minister, Brad Hazzard?
That's not correct. My wife called me coming back from an event, and I spoke to Brad to get his advice in relation to the situation, and Brad was actually, randomly enough, with the head of ambulance at that point in time, and they said to me, go home, be with your wife, and which I did. And an ambulance was called. So
the Health Minister or the Ambulance Commissioner called the ambulance for your wife?
I'm not sure of those details.
Do you understand that most people in New South Wales wouldn't have the access to call the Health Minister or the Ambulance Commissioner when they need an ambulance, that 1 in 10 people are waiting more than an hour for an ambulance, that my 1-year-old was nearly left without a mother because an ambulance took 2 hours to come, and you were able to get the Ambulance Commissioner and the Health Minister to organise an ambulance to your house?
I certainly didn't ask for any favours in relation to that, Shari.
So at no point had you or your wife or any member of your family initially called for an ambulance and was told that it would take about 40 minutes or there'd be a long wait?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
You've been defending the ambulance system during this election campaign, you know, when you've just had your own experience of having to get the Ambulance Commissioner involved to get an ambulance to your house. Do you think that was in any way misleading?
Well, I reject the proposition in the question, Shari.
So did he call 000 and there was some special line? No. But of course, when you ring the Health Minister, and be honest, if you were the Premier of any state, would you do it? Probably. But the reality is that we all know how these things look. Now, I know I get a lot of emails from people saying, why are you cheering for a Labor victory in New South Wales? I'm not. I'm cheering for One Nation to have a very big say regardless of what happens on Saturday in the upper house. That's what I'm cheering for. What am I seeing? Well, I've got my own eyes, I've got my own brain, and you can see what's happening here. Now, if Dominic Perrottet in some way, shape or form actually gets there, let me tell you again, a few days out, why this might be the case. While I don't feel it as strongly as I did in 2019, and you know how certain I was of that, and nothing is inevitable in politics, the truth about this election is that there is still a significant number of people to make up their mind. But as I showed you last night, the polling that came out of the Sydney Morning Herald is that if they are making up their mind, they are making it up exclusively in the direction of the government, not the opposition. So if Labor wins, it will be effectively that the campaign didn't matter at all, just like, say, the federal election before it. But have a look at this. According to the Turnbull Times today, so grateful that, of course, he entered other players into the market, there is the Preferred Premier poll. The Preferred Premier poll shows that Perrottet is leading, but ever so slightly, but about a third of people with less than a week to go are still undecided. What could be a problem here for Chris Minns? Again, the bloke who thinks that he can coast on the electric bus to the premiership. 26% of Labor voters don't know who the preferred Premier is. Now, if you can't convince your own people, how are you going to convince anyone in the middle? Compare that to the extreme minority of people who is, 16% for Libs? It's up in the air for the Greens, but they don't care, and it's up in the air. 52% of people that are voting for the minor parties. As for some federal polling, which is around today via the Turnbull Times, guess what? The country's headed in the wrong direction. According to the bulk of people, 42% of people saying that it's headed in the wrong direction, and 38% of people saying it's in the right direction, 20% still haven't made up their mind.